Thank you very much, Speaker. It's my pleasure to join debate today in what I consider to be an historic and very important day for the province of Ontario, the entire country of Canada, and for amateur sport in our nation. It is also very personal to me that I'm joined here by my dear friend, constituent, and effectively a family member to me now, Gord Stringer. We have been on a journey, a tremendous journey that has had many ups and downs, but I think today, finally, as we move forward in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have the definitive concussion legislation this country needs in the name of his daughter, Rowan Stringer. I would be remiss today if I didn't let Gord know and this entire House know that also today, with the aid of our Clerk of the Legislative Assembly, that I was able to transfer all Rowan's Law materials, whether that is the logo, the website, and our social media, to the Government of Ontario as a Legislative Assembly transaction. And so today that is now run by the Government of Ontario, and part of this piece of legislation will ensure that there is a portal called Rowan's Law, and that stuff that we all worked so very hard on early on 3 years ago will now be in the hands of our Government of Ontario. Thank you to you. Your wife, Kathleen, who I wish was here today. I'd love to have seen her and to see her smile, and of course Cassie and the rest of the family. The history of Rowan's Law, my colleagues have noted, goes back to when my constituent Rowan Stringer died on the rugby pitch after multiple concussions. She died from second impact syndrome. It rocked our community at the time, and at the time we also, before we had prorogued, there had been legislation on the books on concussions. I remember that day, Speaker, because Walter Gretzky was in the gallery, and just months after that we prorogued and that legislation died, so too did my constituent Rowan Stringer. But her mum and her father, Gordon and Kathleen, didn't want Rowan to pass on without something changing. And they participated in a coroner's inquest that came forward with 49 recommendations, many that had to deal with the provincial government. And after that, they came to my office in June of 2015. And when they came to my office, I didn't really know how I was going to help Gord, but I said I would. And throughout the summer, I contemplated how we could best put this together, talked to a number of people, including Dr. Michael Strong from the University, Western University, and many others, Charles Tater, and we built a grassroots team. And I think that it's always important when we tell the story about Rowan's Law how grassroots it really was, and how it started around a farm table in a restaurant in a strip mall in Nepean. And it was because of our friends from the Barrhaven Scottish Rugby Club and so many other people, including Joe and Linda Price, who opened their restaurant to us for many afternoons, as we sat and we mobilized. And what we did is we not only mobilized the rugby community, but we mobilized the entire sporting community in the city of Ottawa. And as it became clear that we wanted to bring forward legislation, I gave Gord and Kathleen a couple of options. I said we can do it 3 ways. I know I can get a resolution to pass the House, but we will never have a Rowan's Law, and that's what we want. I could put forward my own piece of legislation as a Conservative MPP, and it might get to second reading. Or I could do something which I've never done before, and I can reach out and create a parliamentary team to go with our Nepean team from people from all political parties. And we could co-sponsor this legislation with a member from Ottawa South and the member from Kitchener-Waterloo. And Gord and Kathleen thought about it, and they liked the third option. They liked that Rowan had brought people together throughout her life, and that this would be very much in the spirit of what Rowan would want. She would want all members of this Assembly to work toward eliminating death by concussion. So we chose to do that, and we mobilized. And there was one day on a Saturday in Barrhaven before the legislature came back in 2015, and we stood for 2 hours in the rain. And there were hundreds of athletes, hundreds of coaches, hundreds of people stood there for 2 hours as we talked about the need for concussion legislation in the province of Ontario. And through that team, that Barrhaven team that will become also that parliamentary team, we put forward legislation. And we put forward legislation to what is now our third minister, so welcome, Minister. I would like to actually acknowledge my friend Michael Coteau, who I don't believe we would be here without you. You played an integral role, along with Catherine Fife and John Fraser, as well as the previous minister and Eleanor McMahon and the current minister Diane Vernile. This really does.
If I may ask that you refer to the members by the riding, not by name, please.
Thank you, Speaker, but there was a method to my madness, because I think sometimes people at home have to understand who they are, regardless of what their riding is. So I do beg your indulgence, and I'm not telling you. So I'm about to. This was a historic speech, and I may have to throw my pen back at you. Oh, that's not allowed. In any event. But it's important that I recognize these members, because at the end of the day, when we want to talk about sports, we talk about teamwork. And today here we are as a legislature being part of, I think, a very historic team. And it doesn't stop there, because when myself and my two colleagues from the other political parties and the previous minister got together, we then created not just the Nepean team, not just the parliamentary team, but then we had also this Toronto team. And it was incredible. We had people from Coaches Canada, Rugby Canada, many, many organizations that came and really felt that the Athletic Therapists Association, Eric Lindros joined our team, and we really were committed, and we really were interested. Parachute Canada, I would be remiss not to mention them. We were really committed to seeing this through and to bring forward not only the best ideas on how to research concussion and how to treat concussion, but how to gain awareness and how to make sure that parents know when their kids hit their head that they have to ask if they've got a concussion and ask for a series of symptoms that they may have. And through that, I think we broke a lot of ground, and we were able to talk through 5 different ministries about the need to bring some semblance of order, whether that's the Ministry of Education, Health, Children and Youth, colleges, university and training, and so we were able to, I think, really bring that forward. And when we passed on that historic day, I believe it was June the 7th, 2016, when we passed that, it allowed for an advisory committee to take place and to do their work over a year. Gord was able to be part of that, as many others were, and they really did something that I think we ought to be doing more of in the province of Ontario, taking either a public health issue or a public policy issue that is by far something that is so nonpartisan that we can all agree that a group of people appointed by our government, working hand in hand with our legislators, can go off and study it and come out with recommendations that we can all accept, because we know it's in the best interests of the province of Ontario. In this particular case, what we are talking about today and what that committee did is in the best interest of not just the province of Ontario, but more importantly, on behalf of the youth of this province and their safety, and in some cases, the safety of their lives. So I want to congratulate the committee for the great work that they've done and reporting expeditiously to this House. One of the things that we did, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the other stuff, Gord, that we did, because it's really important. That I've always believed that you know, we don't have to make change just through government. We can make change as individuals. We can make change as a community. And one of the things that Gord and I really enjoyed doing this past summer was we put on a golf tournament, and we raised a substantial amount of money, and we brought a lot of athletes, and particularly from the CFL, who had dealt with concussion, and they came out and they hosted us to a not only great golf tournament, and thanks also to the Barhaven's Heart and Crown, but they also did this panel, and these athletes, these pro athletes, actually sat there and talked to all of the players in that golf tournament about the impacts of concussion. And I thought one of the most beautiful exchanges was from our friend Ken of Rare, who's a former CFL player, also a constituent of mine from Barhaven. And Ken has decided he is going to donate his brain to concussion research. And he was telling us, and he was telling Gord and Kathleen, in what was, I thought, one of the most amazing moments, that he had lost his sister, and he didn't quite understand what had happened when he was younger. And I'm not sure, but he believed that his little sister had had a brain injury. And so for him, that was a moment that he wanted to share that, and he had never shared it before. And the fact that he shared it there with Kathleen and Gord and so many of us who are committed to concussion research and treatment and advocacy, it was really an incredible evening. And from there, because we were able to raise this money, Speaker, what we were able to do is work with Algonquin College, and it was important for us to work with a university or college that is in close proximity to our community of Nepean. Obviously, Algonquin College is in Nepean, and Gordon and Kathleen are from Barrhaven. And we were able to put forward an amazing summit. And I was so enthusiastic about this summit because we had pro athletes, we had leading researchers, we had emergency physicians, we had, we had actually the person who threw or got the game-winning touchdown for the Grey Cup talk about the impact of concussion and where to go. And what was in the crowd was even more impressive. Because what was in the crowd when Gord, myself, and Eric sat on that amazing panel, and I looked out into the crowd, Speaker, I saw representatives from every single athletic organization in Nepean Carleton. And that meant to me that the work we're doing at the legislature started to penetrate. Regardless if the legislation had passed yet or not, it started to penetrate on how important this was for the people of our constituency. And that Rowan's law, that Rowan's legacy is what we called it, Rowan's Legacy Symposium, was really quite something. And we did that with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which has been an incredible resource for Gord and myself and so many others. And so we took it upon ourselves in our community to continue that advocacy. But what's important now is not just these one-off things that may happen in Nepean or they may happen at Western University through See the Line. They have to happen everywhere across Ontario. And that's where I want to talk. And I know we have a Nepean Wildcat is here somewhere. She's a page. And everybody knows I'm a Nepean Wildcat. And I'm the trainer, and I have been for a couple years, of my daughter's hockey team. And I have to tell you, I've had the experience on occasion, and I don't think I would have taken it or understood how serious concussion would be if it were not for Gordon and Kathleen and the research that I was able to be part of. Then when I became the trainer and I actually had to take a child out of play, and I'll tell this couple of stories because I've had to take them off when I knew they were concussed, and then I have taken them off and then put them back on when I knew they just didn't want to play. And so I'll give you that experience, Speaker. One of the girls, it was at the end of the last season, and we were in the playoffs. We had a decent team, nowhere near as good as the team we have this year, Speaker, but it was toward the end of the season, and obviously every parent has paid their fee. They've paid their registration and the team fees on top of that. They've paid for the tournaments. They've paid for the extra ice time. They've paid, because our kids grow, for extra equipment. So of course the parents want their kid to play. And in this instant, it was no different. My player, she hurt herself not on the ice, she hurt herself at school, and the doctor had cleared her. But I just didn't think something was right, so I asked her the questions that I was supposed to ask as a trainer. I didn't feel quite comfortable, so I wasn't going to clear her, but I did say, we can go out for a community skate. My daughter will come, and we'll skate down one end of the ice and back. And I asked her, do you have a headache or do you feel nauseous? And she said yes. And so I said, I think we should go home. And her dad asked me right then and there, I want her to play, can she play? I said, no, she can't play. She's got a concussion. And I know this isn't going to be fun, but she can sit on the bench with her helmet and she can watch, she can participate. But given what we know and given what Gord knows, the most dangerous thing you can do is put your kid back on the ice or on the pitch or on the field with a head injury. So we pulled her. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, we were on the ice, and the kids, I think the game was too early, they were all tired. We gave them all, we actually brought the nurses down, we brought one of the athletic trainers down, and they were fine. But the reality is, it has impressed upon me the need for every amateur sport in the province of Ontario to take this seriously. Ask the questions. It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And I'll go to one more, just final private point. My husband suffered a concussion last year, and it was quite. Actually, the concussion was better than the neck I thought he broke after he fell on the ice. I mean, this can happen on almost any way. You could fall off your bike. You can fall off your steps. You can slip on the ice. That sort of thing. And you know, he believed he was fine. And it took, and he's still dealing with the effects of that concussion. It's a lot better today than it was at that particular point in time, but it took a lot more than a couple of days, 10 days. It took weeks before he was able to look at his screen again on his BlackBerry. So I think that's really important, that we recognize that we really do need this legislation, and it's very important that we work on all of this together. But I won't belabor this, because I know most members of this Assembly are very much in support of Rowan's Law, a Rowan's Day, protocols in place throughout all of our ministries, that we have one portal that's deemed Rowan's Law, and that be the gold standard not only in Ontario but in Canada. And I think the fact is that we are the first jurisdiction in our country to deal with legislation, and I often will say it's a bit of an embarrassment that we all had to lag behind every jurisdiction in the United States before we took this seriously, and we understood that these impacts could lead to, quite frankly, Speaker, there's a wide variety of other diseases that can occur after there are sustained head injuries, depending on the severity. And there's great research being done in the province of Ontario, whether that's CTE, a second impact syndrome, Alzheimer's could be one, ALS is another. And I think that when we start to talk about this, I think a lot of researchers get very excited about the opportunities that they may have in able to do more research to mitigate some more of those other diseases that could come forward. And I think then that becomes a question, and I know others might want to talk about this, but it also becomes an issue for them about the funding and how do they fund their research. And I certainly encourage that because I think if we can prevent brain injury from happening, that is key. Mitigating it so that people aren't continuing to play with severe head injuries. That's another thing, but also to ensure that when it does get to that stage that we're treating it, that's really important. And I also wanted just to point out when I talked a little bit about Ken Rare donating his brain, and I talked a little bit about Concussion Legacy Foundation. Gordon and I had the opportunity this past summer to work with Chris Nowinski. I never thought I would share a stage with a neurosurgeon, and I did. I never thought I would share a stage with a Hockey Hall of Famer, and I did. I also didn't think ever in my life I would share a stage with a Worldwide Wrestling Federation star. But Chris Nowinski, who is Harvard educated and works at Boston University with the brain bank there, flew up from Boston to be with Gord and myself as we attended not only a board meeting of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, which was started in Boston, but came here as well to do a press conference with us to talk about the brain bank and to talk about the need for Canada to have a national strategy. And from there, myself and Eric Lindros have co-authored op-eds on this. A number of us, including the former physician for the Montreal Canadiens, have sent a letter to every health minister and sport minister in the country, asking other jurisdictions within our country to follow suit as they have here in Ontario. And I'm pleased to say that I've heard from other governments, notably from Manitoba and New Brunswick, that they are interested and they are watching what Ontario is doing. So to the minister's point, as historic leaders in Confederation, we have a role to play in maintaining our vocal support for concussion legislation and our expectation that when our kids, if they're playing hockey for the Nepean Wildcats and they cross the river over into Gatineau, which is only 2 minutes away, then our young athletes will be treated the same on that ice surface as they would be on our surface in the city of Ottawa. And I think that we have a role to play there as nation leaders and as people who are pursuing this as vigorously as we have for the past number of years, that we continue to do that. So that to me is something that is absolutely critical. It's something that I think should make its way right across the nation, regardless of sport. And I will note this, Speaker, that in Nova Scotia recently, a young man's career, a midget AAA player, his name was Rowan. A midget AAA player had his career cut short. He was probably going to go to Junior A, and he had a very bad hit. And the kid that did it, that checked him, ended up with, I think, a 4-minute penalty or something like that. But this young man will never, ever, ever play hockey again. And I remember it coming up on my feed, as all of you know, I'm originally from Nova Scotia, and I thought, wow, this, to me, we still have a big message to get down at the grassroots level, that type of violence in hockey or any other sport could have long-lasting health impacts to the person who has been hit in the head. And is a 4-minute penalty or a 10-minute penalty enough after they've put a child not only to the emergency room, like many of us could with a broken elbow or a sprained ankle, but for the rest of their life, suffering from headaches, vomiting, depression, anxiety? So I think, it's one thing for us to have this conversation here today, but it's quite another for every one of us to leave here and when we're in our constituencies to talk about it, because it is a real impact. And it is documented, not by me but by Stats Canada, that most visits to the ER by young people are because of injury in sport, and a majority of those injuries are because of head injury. And so I think we have to be realistic that, our ERs right now in our hospitals across Ontario and Canada are dealing with this very real health and public safety concern. So it's very important that we continue to pressure other jurisdictions to follow suit, particularly when our athletes may play there. And so, I didn't prepare my remarks because this has been this has been a very important and personal issue for me, and it was one that gained me some great friends and family and people we really care about in the Stringer family, but some others came along the way as well, and new friendships were made. And I think with the passage of Rowan's Law, we'll be able to ensure that Rowan's legacy will last forever, and that any child in Ontario that plays any type of sport will have a level of protection from their sporting organization and from somebody who is on the bench who is qualified to do an assessment of that child and who is required to take them out of play until they are cleared to play again, medically cleared by a physician. And I don't think we could be any more clear as a legislature than indicating that here today and through the passage of this legislation. I know that Gordon has travelled across all of Canada taking his message of the severity of concussions to the next level. And we know that we have a lot of allies throughout the country. And I might note this, Gord, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Andrew Liu was just traded, and he works with us in the Concussion Legacy Foundation. He was just traded to the Red Blacks last week. Yeah, I was really excited. So we're going to have a really good ally in the City of Ottawa with the Red Blacks organization, as we also do with Ettore and with Connor Williams as well. So Speaker, with that, I've spoken many times on the need for concussion legislation, and in particular for the need for Rowan's Law. This will be the second Rowan's Law. I heartily support it. It has the support of every person I know in Nepean Carleton who really personally feel that this legislation is part of the City of Ottawa. It would not be done without the courage of my colleagues in both of these political parties, but especially my friend Gordon and his wife Kathleen and their family, and so many other people that have been so instrumental in making sure that we are all part of this together. And I couldn't be more proud to stand here today than to say, yes, the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus will support this legislation. We have been pleased to work with the government and the third party for immediate passage of this bill before the legislature rises before an election, so that there will be a Rowan's Law Day next year in the name of Rowan Stringer. And I just again want to say thank you to all members of this House for the support you have shown the Stringer family, myself, and as well as my two colleagues from Kitchener-Waterloo and Ottawa South as we've gone through what has been a very powerful experience for us, but on many occasions also very emotional for us. And I really look forward to the day that this is all passed. And if I may, Speaker, before I conclude, say once again thank you to the Clerk of the Legislative Assembly, as well as to the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sports staff for making that historic arrangement between myself as the MPP passing over a legislative set of resources to the government in such a seamless way, and doing that this morning felt very good. It felt historic, it felt proud, and it felt like we've done something together to accomplish something that will save the lives of children. And as I conclude, I want to say to you, Gord, you know, you and Kathleen have been so important to me. Some of it has been public about how helpful you have been to me while we've been working together, but others haven't. And I will forever cherish our friendship and our bond, and I look forward to doing so many more golf tournaments and so many more Rowan's Legacy Symposiums, and really proud that you came up here today to spend it with all of us. So thank you, Corey.